Sorry, I was in the wrong.
No worries. Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I guess we just have to edit the calendar entries.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, we were in different rooms.
Yeah. Apologies. I should have edited the calendar I did last week, and I didn't think of it so much this week. A bit harried these days. And here's Tim. Okay, good. We're all there. Sorry, Tim. I was confused. Okay, we're all there. Let's go. I made a text version and I started a graphic version. I'm not done, sorry, but it'll hopefully still give an idea of what's going on. Let me, I think I should actually put that in the Google Docs so we can all point to it. Didn't think of it yet, but docs, Google.com. Pizza example. Share. Copie le lien and you can edit and copy. Done. Sorry, I'm a bit ill prepared. So here's a Google Doc, which is the work I started on trying to express Stephen's example. And let me also share screen so we have a visual form with even incomplete. And if I didn't finish the work of making this visual. Just fit, yeah, good enough. Do you see my screen? I think so.
Yes.
Okay, and you have my, okay, so we start pretty much with the original story. We have a local conversation, everything's local to context A with the conversation pretty much as before. I've started giving numbers to the lines because they're claims. So what we have is this segment here up to everything's public. I hope you have enough screens to follow both the text and the visual. And then basically what happens is you then make this public, so some of the thing become available to the global context. The how about Hawaiian is not made public here in this storyboard. And then you have, so this is the make public. And so this is important in the global context.
Yeah, I also have a question here because I think part of the confusion yesterday was about what does it mean that it's not public, then where does it live? And it's related to what tooling you envision in this private context. So if how about Hawaiian is not public, where does it reside? And
it resides in context
really
A. Context A has its own.
What is context A? So, I mean, I'm thinking to make it concrete would really be that would be like a chat room, essentially, where somebody writes, how about Hawaiian?
No, okay. Yeah, I have no problem with chat rooms as a starting point, but my assumption here, so since you're asking, is everybody has argument mapping appliance and with their own, if you will, database and their own container of what is visible.
So you would structure this context A discussion in a argument map.
Yes, I'm assuming it's an argument map. I have no problem if this is connected to a conversation as Idealoom does, right? But I'm assuming that here we have an argument map in a local context. That's at least a possibility.
So at some point, somebody then created how about Hawaiian and specified as private in the map, right?
Yep.
Okay.
By default, things are local, and then suddenly it's like, okay, let's actually.
Default is local. Okay.
Yeah. And then you may explicitly make it public, and then the global context can become aware of it. Okay, no, that was a very valid question. And this is back to my definition of context as social community. It's explicitly people, like there's a social boundary, there's people in and out of the context, and in the context, people can decide to say things are valid or invalid, which up to a point doesn't make as much sense in a global context. But okay, and then they say, okay, this is a generic argument, so let's make it public and let's make it available to the global debate. Now, meanwhile, back at the ranch, we have local context B. So that's the next phase where pineapple does not belong on pizza. And we have this whole conversation going on independently. Here I made them public by default. Sorry, this gray is private, this is public. Here there could have been a two-phase animation where they're first private, then public, but okay, let's just go with public. And then because it's public, it gets captured.
So 13 and 15 are public.
The 11, 13, 15, 12, 11, actually here, make 11 to 15 public in the text.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's an explicit step. By the way, some of the make public is not a claim. So the numeration, sometimes it's claims, sometimes it's steps. So I'm a bit wavy on that, but usually the numbers correspond to actual claims. And that's why I'm giving number to the arrows.
It's 4 different from 11?
Yes, because it was like first they started doing it independently. They had this independent conversation on the side, and they said pineapple does not belong on pizza. And maybe there was maybe there was even a different formulation. Pineapple really does not belong on pizza. You know, it's a different phrasing. Doesn't matter. It's imported. And then next step 17, you unify. You decide, you know what, this is the same as this. So,
but are you pointing to something we don't see? Maybe on a window?
I'm both pointing at this window and at the text. Whoops. Oh, God.
And who unifies? Because I think this relates back to.
Yes, that's a yes.
Can you disagree if unification this starts to relate back to some of the?
Yeah. Here, I'm assuming, and that's again very.
Let me just make a side comment there, which is the one thing I was trying to get at the very end of yesterday, which is I'm all on board with having different layers or a context, a type of debate layer, app, or interface that does informal things. It doesn't really solve the problem. It only kind of begs the question again of in the canonical debate part.
Well, this is, I'm just
how
getting
do you solve
into
the problem of no, but I'm just
which problem?
I'm stating explicitly for Stephen that like I'm cool with all this, but it doesn't solve the problem of what happens when you need to fix up or merge or whatever things in the canonical debate.
No, it's independent. I think this whole discussion is independent of unification. That's why I'm a bit confused to bring it into this.
It's not independent. This is exactly where we're at. We have people have made these discussions in parallel. They're both.
But that's one context. I mean, the way I presented it was more that context B refers to the global one instantly.
Yeah.
Which is also a possibility, right?
It's a possibility. I just made a slightly different story where it's parallel, but it could have been a different scenario where they imported 4 from the global context.
In which case, unification is not needed, and we don't need to start discussing unification now, because I think it will sidetrack us.
I wanted to make unification explicit because that was a question asked by Tim, and I don't think it's wrong to say it. Now, the real question, which you ask and which is valid, is who unifies? Now,
yeah, and what do you unify on? Because I mean, this already assumes that there can be 2 claims with the exact same symbol, as you call it, in a global context. In my opinion, that's not possible because they are the same by its mere identity. The identity is determined by pineapple does not belong on pizza.
That's absolutely correct. Here, the reason I'm allowing, okay, this is a bit of a trick of visualization where I'm saying, well, I'm importing this thing and maybe there's there's different ways to interpret this and they're both valid. So interpretation A, those are, when it's imported as a contextual claim. It's this claim as it exists in context B, but the unification happens on the decontextualized claims. So that's like 4 taken from context A and 11 taken from context B have the same underlying unique decontextualized claim, which is just the phrasing. So that's one way to describe this. The other way is to say 11 is imported kind of in a tentative space, and then we realize that once before we put it in the database, hey, it already exists as 4, so let's actually.
Okay, but what you're saying, in other words, is each time you create a concept in a local context, it gets assigned a unique ID of some sort, and if you make it global, there's no unification of any sort by default. That's what you're showing here, right?
Yeah. Well, okay.
Okay, so let's go with that for now, and then let's not discuss whether that's a good idea or not. That's not the point of this scenario.
Now it's very possible that and really this is where I should have said pineapple really does not belong on pizza, because if we're using the hash of the phrase or the phrase as a value object, then of course it's the same number by default. But here I'm assuming, okay, maybe slightly different.
The user is not thinking about hashes. The user just wrote pineapple does not belong on pizza and then made it global. And apparently now there's 2 pineapple does not belong on pizza when you search for it in the global database, correct?
Maybe. That's what I'm saying. I'm glossing over some details here and you're asking me to pinpoint. So if I have to pinpoint, I'll say it depends, like possibly there was a typo in one of the versions, so they don't have the same value object, whether it's hash or the string itself. That's the identifier. So that's one possibility, or there was an adverb or whatever, or it was in another language. You know, that can happen.
Those are all different scenarios.
Those are all different scenarios.
And let's go with that.
No, but I'm trying to say these all apply. Okay, but you're asking me to be precise about what happens, then I'll give you a bunch of scenarios. But right now I was hand waving.
Yeah, but what you wrote now is the exact same text.
Yeah, so let me change that.
If I search in the global context, I will get 2 claims with the exact same text and with a different identity somehow that you can tell them apart.
That's entirely possible.
I don't think that's
But that's what it is right now. Just
but
right. I don't think that's wrong. Like I don't think the text is a primary key.
I think it's a primary key for contextualized claim, and I did not go into contextual and decontextualized claim. It's not the primary key if it's a contextual claim. And
what is a contextual claim? Because you're making it global.
Claim with provenance, but I'm not going into that there. You see, asking those questions changes the context. You're asking me all these questions, and then to answer, I have to adjust. I was fuzzy on this thing. It's not finished. So yes, whether 4 and 11 are distinct objects or not,
I'm not caring about objects. I'm caring what the user sees. Like at this point, the user first had, like in context B, they added a local pineapple doesn't belong on pizza, and then they make it global. My only question was, what happens if you now search in the global context for pineapple does not belong on pizza? What do you see? That was my only question.
You see only one.
Okay.
And at this point, think of this as an intermediate state of the import process, because let me talk, please. The next step is to do the unification.
So unification is a system operation. That was my previous question. Who unifies?
Yes.
So the system unifies.
And you caught me before I could say it. And
fine. So this is an implementation detail we can gloss over. I'm only interested in the user perspective. Okay. So now there's indeed the 2 global additions added to the same pineapple does not belong on pizza that context ACs. Great. Yeah.
Yeah, and then, you know, we can kind of forget about the unification. And my next step in the narrative, and I didn't go that far making pictures, so you'll have to use your imagination a bit.
I do have one question now, actually.
Yes.
If you go now back to the graph, you have 4 and 11. Is 4 different from 11?
Well, yes, because, well, and this is the next slide I didn't have time to finish, which is, as I'm explaining, local context B now adopts 4, 18, and 19 from the global context. And that means it also adopts the, actually, I should have said, why can't I edit? Thank you. Sorry, I'm having, this is just my computer behaving. Why is that? Okay, you know what? Forget it. No, that's important. It's the.
So what does it mean to adopt? What does the user see at that point?
Can I click? Why can't I click?
I think the site is frozen.
Oh, wow. Okay, let me open it in Firefox. Okay, my computer is really sick.
Didn't you have that written down in?
Yes, I do, but I want to do this shared. So okay, that's better. Sign in, please. So I'm myself. No, not that password. Okay. Google. This one. Oh. Sorry about that. Safari misbehaving. That's weird. Okay, so now I'll be able to redefine, unify.
20.
18 to 19. Italians don't get to decide. Okay. 17. Yes. So it adopts 11. 15 get replaced. So basically they adopt the unification, and that means they also get 14, 17, 18. So basically,
can we go to a diagram again?
Yeah, now that doesn't exist. So let me create it. New layer.
Can you maybe just elaborate on what adopt means, like from a user perspective? Well, what does it mean? Well, what changes or what doesn't change?
Why is this not? Oh, yes. What it means is that you accept, especially if it's a replace, when you adopt a replacement, you make the change globally in your space. You say, okay, I accept this, and there's no notion of.
But is all of this still part of making it global, or is this something the user does, or is this something that the system does, and does the user see any of this? No, that's something the user does.
That's something the user does, because the user may not agree that 4 and 11 are the same. Suppose the phrasing was a bit different, because sorry, we keep coming back to that, and I'd like assume the phrasing between 4 and 11 is a bit different.
Yeah, so the user action was in context B, they make 11 public. And then what happens is you're saying there's no, there's unification happening in the global context, which was system automated. Yeah. And
Yeah.
now you're saying context B, they see something.
They see the unification happening in the global context, and then they get to accept or refuse. They say, no, that unification is not good, or yes, there's actually a nuance there, or no, or yes, that's fine, the unification is good, and then they adopt the unification.
So how do they see the unification? Is the global context separate view from the local context?
Yes.
So they have two views, a local one and a global one?
They have either that, or what I think would happen is they have their local view, and each they'd have a view on they have their global view of their local view. They have their they see all their nodes in one view, and then they see, okay, this node, by the way, this node in the global context, here's stuff you got from the global context. Here's stuff from the canonical debate. This thing that you had locally, 11, by the way, this happened in the global context. It got unified with 4. Are you okay with that?
So there would be like some exclamation mark,
yes,
like to review or something.
Yeah.
And then as long as they don't do anything, nothing changes, or?
Yeah, well, they keep they could, and then if they want the exclamation mark to disappear, they would either say, no, there's a nuance missing, that was not a valid unification, or they would, or
let's say they accept it for now. Let's go with that scenario first.
Yeah, and then basically what they'd have is this copy of this with 4 here. So
and how can they tell, how do they know that that copy is global or local?
Well, right now I've expressed global or local with gray outlines. I assume there's a sign to say it's public or private up to a point, right? The 11 here was supposed public. It still exists in the public space. But at this point, if it's replaced, you're saying it exists as an obsolete value because it's been replaced. The question is, has it been replaced by everyone? Like, suppose somebody made a clone of context B and they don't accept the unification, well, then 11 will still be known as, okay, there's this variant version, this variant phrasing, which some people don't agree is the same as the other phrasing. Some people do, and we'll have this superposition of states in a way for 11, because some people think it's the same as 4, some people don't. And I will really change the phrasing when I...
So what they see essentially in context B is something like 4 plus 11. Or...
Well, what they see, if they do accept the unification, then 11 becomes obsolete and they don't see it anymore. If they don't accept
what do they see? So what is the unification? Is that a third concept? Like if somebody else in context C starts adding to 4 in the global context?
Yes.
Is that
that is something you would see, yes, because that's where I was going. I really should have, I'm sorry I didn't finish my slides, but as I said, I was busy thinking about the narrative. What happens, like, for example, this 1819 is visible to context A. Like, context A would now see, oh, look, there's these new exclamation mark. There's this new thing that happened to your number 4. There's been this 1819, right? And all this that's in the global. And so if you, and that was a step. Okay, so here there's a step where you put what was your opposed link, your not relevant link. So I didn't make that into a graph yet. And then basically, if local context A adopts all this, they now have the fact that, hey, this thing is being opposed in public. Let's go back to your diagram, actually. This not relevant, Italians don't put pineapple in pizza, that would be public. And then context A would see it. Context A would have, hey, there's this.
And can context, is adoption only on what do you mean by C? Is it again an exclamation mark and they need to accept it or not, or
yes,
something?
Yes. Adoption in local context, in what I call social context or community contexts, adoption, like importing stuff from the global is explicit, pushing stuff, making things public to the global is explicit. You'd have a kind of, hey, this is happening, your little curated bubble. Here's how it looks. Here is stuff that points to it, unifies to it in the global context. So you may decide to adopt those things or not. But here, assume they're being adopted. It's, oh, by the way, this is being attacked. And you should know about that. So that would be an exclamation mark. Your point is being attacked. And so you would see, okay, I accept that this attack is relevant. Okay. And so it becomes part of my local context. So you adopt it.
But so if you go back to the diagram, that does mean that there's a clear visual distinction between what is local and public, right?
Yep.
And whenever something is public, it means you get these exclamation adoption notifications. If something is local, that won't happen.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Correct.
But in your formulation, Marc-Antoine, there is no global, right? It's just all contexts.
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, no, there is. Okay. No, there is. I often say it's all contexts, but I speak of the federation, and it's true that the rule that there is a fractality of context. But what Stephen expressed as central canonical database, anything is not stated explicitly, is open for discussion. I speak of it as the federation layer. It could be a central database or it could be federation. I decided to make that not go into that because it doesn't matter. There is indeed a context where nobody's in charge. That means there's no notion of accept, reject. You just tally the fact that some people in whatever local context accept this or reject this or whatever, and you have a kind of social truth value saying, well, this is how this thing is being considered by some people. But you don't try to resolve truth in the what I call the federation layer and what you call the central canonical database. There's a system action of unification, but there's no system action of, and even that. Yeah.
Even unification doesn't need to be accepted.
Exactly. It's just noted these somebody or the system thought these should be unified. And it can be accepted or rejected, but you will know that this claim is accepted in many contexts, rejected in many contexts, or rejected, consensual, accepted by most contexts, fringe, accepted by very few contexts, controversial, accepted and rejected by many contexts. So you would know that at the kind of social layer of the federation layer. But at the federation layer itself, there's nobody accepting and rejecting. So there is that difference. What you have is what Stephen calls the base layer, I think, where you see all the claims and there's no truth value evaluation, or there's many truth value evaluations in that way, but non-privileged. Whereas what I call the social context, the local contexts, there you have people taking decisions, saying this is accepted, this is rejected in this context by this community, by whatever social process they have for doing things collectively or individually if the context is a single person. Okay. So let's go back to the narrative. So here I'm assuming, as I said, where am I? Redefines, adopt local context. Okay, so you adopt all this. That means you accept that this is true. And now there's two scenarios.
How do you deal with partial adoptions and
you have
like
partial adoption?
Unification between three, for example. What if you accept the unification of two, but not the third one, etc.?
Yeah.
And then what does that mean if somebody in one context adds something to one of the three and they don't know what they're adding it to because they accepted the unification? So in essence, they're adding it to, so suppose I have three claims, 1, 2, and 3. in context A, it's accepted that 1 and 2 are unified. They add something to that unification, but they don't know which one. But in another context, that unification got rejected, but there's unification of 2 and 3. What happens?
That's an implementation detail. I have an
Is it?
answer. I'll try to give it very quickly, but I mean, I'd rather go on the main narrative. Basically, what happens is if you reject a unification, what you're doing is you're saying, well, I'm probably giving another name to the non-unified thing locally. I'm saying this thing that I didn't unify, this is how I call it because it's not the same. So you will see that as a thing in your local context, and you'll have an exclamation mark. Oh, something added something to this.
But it's already global. I don't know, but
yeah, it's
unification happened on the global scope.
Yes.
So you have 3 things that are global. 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Was unified by someone apparently.
Yes.
You don't accept that unification.
So you have 1 and 2 in your context as separate objects. And somebody.
Yes, so my question was, what happens if in the other context where they are unified, you start adding arguments? What happens in the other context that didn't accept unification?
You'll probably, I assume unification is directional in that suppose you're unifying 1 and 2, then 2 gets forgotten and 1 gets prioritized. One of them gets to be the key version. So what you will see is people adding to 1 on your local context and not adding to 2. And you'll say, oh, no, actually, this is about 2. This is not about 1 because I don't accept the unification.
So you pick one of the 2 and then it depends on.
Yeah.
But how do you, okay. That seems fairly arbitrary. But okay.
I will get into how to make it less arbitrary, but really this is a side issue.
It's not a side issue because
it is
part of
for now.
Why my base layer unification is something that's agreed upon in the base layer, not on a local context. So it's not a side issue, but okay, let's assume for now that it isn't. I just envision problems there as I just highlighted. But
you're not wrong. It's an issue that needs to be resolved. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm saying the details of it can wait a bit because there's other stuff I want to cover. So there's 2 scenarios that I want to cover. One is, okay, having been made aware of this opposition, the people in context A may decide to make a replacement locally. So the hidden assumption, we're looking at traditional Italian pizza is made explicit. It was an implicit thing. It's made into an actual claim. Then they create this claim, pineapple does not belong on traditional Italian pizza. Can I do this? And okay. Italians.
So you're clearly saying at any given point you are saying whether these additions are global or local, right?
Yeah, this is now happening in local context A. So
yeah.
I'm doing the replacements. I'm creating, like, one possibility is the people in context A hear about the opposition from context B, and then they decide to resolve it themselves. That's one option. So they make this explicit. They say, oh,
but they hear about it because the original one was global.
Made public, and then they adopted it.
Yes.
And then they adopted it. So here they create the new version. They make the local oppose support, blah, blah, blah. And they make the replacements. They're saying, actually, we didn't mean it doesn't belong on pizza. We meant it does not belong on traditional Italian pizza. And they make the replacements globally. That is, they abandon claim 7, the original.
Wait. Okay, this is the interesting bit. What does it? 29 replace. Okay, which one of these are local and which ones are global? Because
here they're all local until.
So what does it mean to replace 29, which was public? Wasn't 29 public? No.
Yeah. We're saying, well, in this, see, I don't. Okay. Well, I'm saying locally, I replace 5 by 29. I'm saying
locally you replace 5. 5 is
Well, this
4
one, sorry, I'm
opposes
looking at this one. We
3.
could look at this one. So locally, 3 was not public. This is why I'm not taking this one. But 5, I think 5 was public. No, 4, 6, 7 was public. Which one was public?
I think I need to see a diagram, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Let me actually put this. Oh.
Because don't rush over this, because this is the
No,
key
I
point
agree.
here.
I agree. It's crux. Totally. I want to take that seriously. Narrower, please.
Because I'm at any given point, I'm trying to understand, what do people looking at the base layer see? What do people in the local context see? And what do people in the other context see? That's the thing I'm interested in. That's what this scenario was about.
I understand perfectly.
Okay.
So here I'm replacing 3 and 5, which are purely private. That doesn't seem to be enough. Here's really the important thing. 27 replaces 7. I'm replacing this one, right? Where am I replacing 4? Maybe I forgot to do it. No, I did not. I did not forget to do it.
But at any given point, you're not looking at numbers, right? So I mean, it's a bit confusing that you're saying you're replacing a number. What is the user replacing, and what does the user see?
One second, I'm just looking where I'm looking at 26. Okay, I see what I'm saying. Okay, and I didn't make it explicit. Okay, in this scenario, I didn't make explicit that 26 is replacing 4. It could have been made explicit in the sense saying, by the way, we didn't mean 4, we meant 26 instead. So that would have been another replacement. Replacement means in a local context.
But we're at a scenario where pineapple does not belong on pizza is made global. So they can see this thing, this number 4 apparently got added global, and they wrote, I can see it here. But so it's global. So what does it mean in a local context? So they're looking at this global claim in a local context. Is that what you mean?
Yes, okay. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. They're looking from them. It's not that it's a global. See, this is exactly the difference of thinking between you and me. You think, oh, this is a local claim. This is a global claim. No, it's the same claim.
But just continue. I'm trying to
no. But
understand what you meant explicitly by in a local context.
This is important. I'm trying to explain what I mean.
Yes.
So don't cut me when I'm trying to explain. I don't think of the claim being local or global as a difference of nature. It may be public. It may be, you may or may not have a reference to it, but it's the same claim. So when you're saying you're looking at the global claim in a local context, no. I'm looking at a claim which happens to be public in a local context.
But the user needs to be aware about that or not? That it's public or local?
Probably the user can know if it's private or public.
Private or public, yes. That's, for me, is what gives them a different nature. If they don't know whether it's private or public or whatever you want to call it, whatever you're comfortable with, but do you recognize that there's a difference there in that very nature, that one you call private, the other public?
No, that's not what I'm recognizing. I'm not recognizing that at all. I'm saying they have exactly the same nature.
What is the nature of the property that where it differentiates between private and public?
I've made it available or not. It's not a difference of nature. It's a difference of broadcasting. That's what and
it's a difference that they need to be aware about.
Yes, correct. But it's not a difference of nature.
Okay.
It does not change nature by being made public. No.
Yes, but any given claim they're looking at can be private or public, correct?
Yes, yes, and they're aware of that.
Let's go with that.
Yeah. So here I'm saying the replacements, and that's the next step. When I'm replacing, if I'm replacing in a context, I'm kind of making it global. Like if I'm replacing, like this happened before, right? When in context B, they took the unification, they adopted the unification. That means everywhere there was 11 got replaced by 4. So that's a replacement in a context, in a local context, invalidates the previous version. It still exists, it's still visible, but it's seen as invalid in context. Again, valid, invalid is local concept. You don't have valid, invalid in the global context, but you have made the replaced context invalid locally. So that means everything that used it has to be redefined. It cascades. Maybe there were private.
So let's go over an example. Which one are you replacing?
Here, it's the story where I was. Let me show this. Here is the example where I'm replacing 11 by 4.
But
so,
you said there was a system operation, but so now you're accepting. So the system suggests a replacement.
I did not make yet the same schema in context B, but in the global context, they coexist. It's just that they both coexist. But if it's in the local context, the 11 gets invalidated and disappears. In the global context, it's there as kind of, okay, is anybody still referring to that? Maybe not. And probably when you see it, you see, oh no, this one got unified and replaced and everybody agreed with it. So forget that one. So it could be filtered out. It still exists, but it gets filtered out because nobody still uses it. But as long as people still use it, it's still there. As it wouldn't be filtered out because
and the 13 and 15 need to keep pointing to 11 because otherwise other people can't reject those. Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. But when context B adopts it, then they replace, and I haven't drawn that, they replace 11 by 4, and maybe they keep a copy or not, depends if they're immutable base or not, it doesn't matter. But what's really available from then on is 4, 18, 19, because 11, 13, 15 has been replaced, have been made invalid in that context. So in context, things can become thoroughly invalid.
Yeah, but so simply put, what they're looking at is still a global, a public claim.
Yeah,
Pineapple does not belong on pizza.
But what I wanted to say is I could imagine a case where there's still a private thing that depends on that. Right now there isn't. But suppose this one had been kept private. Okay, so the cascade from 13 to 18 would have happened globally, but the cascade from 15 to 19 would have happened only within context B, right? If you suppose that 14 had been kept private, has not been made public, so the 15 to 19 cascade does not happen globally, then in that case,
okay, so they keep it private.
They keep 14 private for whatever reason.
Yeah, again, I'm not interested in implementation details. So yes, you replace it and you're still looking at a public claim. Let's now go to the other side, the one that the scenario is set up for, right?
Yeah.
You don't unify replace, but you do something different.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean anymore. What I was saying is the cascade can be global, in which case maybe 15, 14 will never be exposed because they've been replaced by, well, I mean, sorry, 15 will never be exposed because it'll be replaced by 19 locally before it's made public. That's what I'm saying. So maybe 15 will never be seen by anyone if the cascade happens before 14 is made public. Anyway, so that's another story. But now let's finish that scenario. We're back to scenario 1. So we now import those replacements. So we've replaced 3 and 5 by a version that uses where is it? Pineapple is not. Yeah, sorry. No, sorry, 5 and 7, those 2 links by a version that uses 26, which is not yet in the diagram. Pineapple does not belong on traditional Italian pizza because I've created.
Okay, but let's look at the users here. So because you skipped the step apparently where a objection to the relevance was made publicly and context A becomes aware about it. Is that where you're starting from?
Yeah, now I'm supposing the objection to relevance is made publicly. That was my
So
other
exclamation mark pops up,
yes
right?
Yes. Yes,
in
absolutely.
context A.
On
And
7.
then what happens? So they say, no, we don't want to accept his opposing
No,
argument to
suppose they
relevance.
see that makes sense. Suppose they see that relevance argument is valid. It makes sense. So let us correct our statement.
Okay. Okay.
So they create the variant statement 26. Pineapple does not
Where?
belong.
Local, global?
Local for now.
Local. Okay.
They're working locally. Everybody's working locally at first.
Okay.
Pineapple does not belong on traditional Italian pizza. They create that. They create this supports Italian don't put. It's supported by Italians don't put on pineapple on pizza. It opposes how about Hawaiian? That's local.
Wait.
And this.
So okay. So they're gonna actively recreate the whole underlying argument structure, or
they're going to actively create the variant argument structure, and maybe I should take the time to do it because we're
no, but this is important because so
it is.
Suppose they were like, this was a def argument tree of like 5 deep. They have to recreate all of that.
Well, some of it will be automatic cascade. Like if they go, like in some cases, it would make perfect sense to say, I'm replacing argument 4 by argument 26. Right? And then
yes, exactly. That's a use case.
That's a use case. And then basically 7 would cascade, right? 7 would say, oh, it's now talking about argument 26 because I've done a global replacement. Here, the way I wrote it in this text was they left 4 alone. They did not replace it. They left it there. They accept the opposition, it's invalid, but they left it there. They created 26 on the side and recreated the 7 link.
Yeah, but it's a recreating process, that's the problem. So the use case is exactly when they wrote in that context, pineapple does not belong a bit, so they meant something different. So,
yes.
But your suggestion is that they keep they accept the global definition, what I call the CDL, no assumptions, whatever, and they recreate the entire argument with a new global, well, maybe first local and then they make that global.
What I'm saying is these are 2 valid scenarios. I should call them 1A and 1B. 1A, I went through, it's where they decide replace 4 by 26 and then all the cascades happen. And that's a simple case. They could decide
they happen automatically. If so, how? And then we need to talk to that. Are they local, global, and all that impact? Or
they're local. I'm saying.
And is it done by users or the system?
In the case of replacement, it's done by the system. When you replace, anything that uses the replaced version cascades to use the new version.
Okay, so they see you, Felix. So 4 is global.
Yes.
They decide to replace it with
26.
26.
And that's a local replacement.
Locally.
Yes, locally. That's a local
replacement.
Yeah, so that means that they're now replacing 4 by 26, 5 by 29, and 7 by 27 in my text. Okay, and this is automatic.
Means that whatever replaces 7 is also local then.
It's also local provisionally.
So you have do you have a global 6 then referring to a local 26?
For now, yeah. With a local link. And then, next step, they decide, okay, we've made the correction, let's make them public. So they make all of these local things public. Well, not the replacement of 5, because 5.23, which is still private, so it makes no sense to make that public. But the replacement of 7 and the replacement of 4, they make those replacements public. So now the global context, this is here. Here's, context A has now published the fact that they actually don't use 7 anymore. They instead use 26. Sorry, they
Wait,
don't
wait,
use
wait,
4
wait,
anymore.
wait,
They
wait.
instead use 26.
So-
They don't use 7 anymore. They instead use 27. They use the
No,
new
I
versions.
can follow. Just a second. So what happened? What was made public by context A?
The new link, the new versions, the new private version. I said,
So they select everything and they make public, or what are they doing? Or this happens automatically, or
well,
what's happening?
Okay. When they make the replacement of 4 by 26, I suppose that there could be a modality. Do you want me to make that replacement public automatically now or not? Right? That could be a checkbox.
So I'm trying to figure out what does that mean? Like, to which degree does it cascade? Does it mean that How About Hawaiian also becomes public, or
no?
How do you know that How About Hawaiian becomes public and others not? Like, who decides and how?
Okay. That's a perfectly valid question, and I'm not sure I have a great answer to that. See, when the replacement of 4 by 26 becomes public, right? It makes sense for the cascade to extend to 7 being replaced by 27, because both 26 and 6 are public, and 7 is a link between 2 public things. It should also, and 7 was public, so I'm replacing.
Okay, so you could, making it public, in other words, would mean making every public link public.
Yes, that would be
we can go with that for now.
A reasonable heuristic, whereas 5 was not public because 3 was not public. So
but that's why I asked, because you jumped like 10 steps ahead. Okay, so let's go with that for now.
Yeah, and then the global context becomes aware. Okay, context A has made those replacements. That means nobody.
Okay, so what does it? You get to see. What does it mean that in the global context you see? So you get again an exclamation mark and you see, hey, this was replaced in some place with something else, or what does to?
I don't think the global context has exclamation marks, because anything that's made public is immediately visible in the global context.
Okay, sorry, yeah. So in context B, there would be an exclamation mark on this 4.
Possibly, yes.
That says like this has been replaced in some context with doesn't belong on, what is it?
Doesn't belong on traditional Italian.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And for context B, that doesn't matter because their counter argument still holds, right? It's still and I'll go to your diagram. This is still not relevant to that. So this doesn't die. No,
it doesn't indeed. That's why I'm wondering why
why
are you bothering
replaced?
People in the global context with a replacement in a local context? Because as you just said, the people in context A, they're perfectly fine with the other one existing. They're not replacing anything. They're just continuing on a different.
It makes sense for context A to say we're replacing. It makes sense for people in the global context. I agree totally. The global thing should not stop existing, but I think it's good for the global context to know that, hey, this replacement was done in at least one context. So next time somebody comes up with pineapple does not belong on pizza, people could know, oh, are you sure you don't mean pineapple does not belong on traditional Italian pizza? Because that was a replacement done.
General to specific, like.
Yeah.
Replacement in this case, right?
Yeah.
So then in the global context, you could essentially say, well, somebody added a more specific claim.
Correct.
Which
is unopposed, as opposed to
is something different than, but that's why I'm trying to figure out, like, what will you show the user indeed, like when you say, what will that exclamation mark mean?
In the context B, what you would have is an exclamation mark on pineapple does not belong on pizza, saying, hey, somebody introduced a more specific claim.
But that's something different than a replacement. That's what I'm saying, because you can perfectly accept, yes, that is more specific, but I don't want to use it here.
Correct.
Yeah.
What are
they doing and how?
The replacements are cascade locally, but the global cascade is much less certain because, yeah, maybe you didn't mean that, but that doesn't mean that someone else doesn't mean that. So the replacement is seen as, okay, somebody thinks that this can be a replacement for that. It's not, it doesn't mean that it's a universal replacement globally.
Okay.
Okay.
So when they then say, no,
Well-
I don't want, let's put it in the best words possible, I don't want to talk about this more specific thing here.
Yeah.
Then there's no,
They just won't, they just
it doesn't fracture.
It doesn't fracture. Either they
Okay.
won't adopt it or they'll adopt it as a subcase.
And what, okay, so that's a case where they don't, what if they do adopt it?
What if they do adopt it?
Because you just said that again, it goes into like, what does replace mean? Because it seems like more this is a specialization case. They didn't really replace anything in context A, they just decided to talk about something different. So, okay, what does it,
Well, okay,
suppose they
the
decide in context B
replacement.
to also talk about traditional pizza.
Okay,
What
the
happens?
replacement in context A, what it means, and I agree with you, and that's why originally in my narrative, I did not have them replace for. I had them replace other things, but because that's a, you know, scenario one X, one Y. I said 1A, 1B, but that's confusing because scenario one could have decided to keep for around. Now I said, okay, let's suppose they replace. They replace means whenever we said 4, we meant 11.
Yeah, but so
and
this
then
is
you
a
have
different
cascade.
replace. I'm trying to understand the effects of this different type of replace. So
Yeah.
can you go to the diagram again?
Yep.
So yes, the context A replaced pineapple doesn't belong pizza with pineapple doesn't belong in traditional Italian pizza.
Yeah.
Now they do want to replace that. They what do they do in context B if they say like, right, that's what we should be talking about? What does that mean?
Well, they could, as I said, they can, they probably will adopt pineapple does not belong in Italian pizza, and then they'll either,
What happens
one
when they
second.
adopt it?
it becomes visible in their view. As
Where?
opposed in, like, again, each context is a container. They have access to anything
As
in
a
the global.
separate loose bubble?
No, 1 second, 1 second. Okay, let's get into that in detail. For me, concepts, I say they're container, but they're also in a way curated view. They won't necessarily show everything in the global context because there's billions of nodes in the global context. So they decide, they pick, you know, oh, I'm taking this bubble in, I'm taking this bubble in from the private context, right? From the public, sorry, from the global context. So here, I assume they would have the little exclamation mark on pineapple on 4, pineapple does not belong on pizza, saying, hey, somebody made a replacement, or somebody, and maybe the global context is already determined this replacement is actually happens to be a subcase or not. So they say, okay, somebody's made a replacement, and then they look at it. They could adopt the new version, pineapple does not belong in traditional pizza, without adopting the replacement. And so that, but instead making a subcase link. And they would make the subcase link public. And then that gets adopted that, hey, it's a subcase and some people have used it as a replacement, some haven't. We know that the replacement is not universally adopted, but we know that the subcase has been made public and nobody's contested it yet.
I'm still not clear what happens if they adopt it. What happens to the view?
Then
to the local context B view.
It gets, if they adopt it, it gets added to the view. If they don't adopt
this is pineapple doesn't belong on pizza is a global claim, right?
It's a claim that they have in their container, and it's a global claim, yes.
So what does it mean when they adopt it?
It means they decide it belongs in their curated view.
And where does it show up? And what happens to the previous pineapple doesn't belong on pizza claim?
Oh, sorry, the new one. you
The
mean
new and the old. What does adopting mean in terms of new and the old claim and the links between them?
Okay, when you adopt pineapple does not belong on traditional pizza, which is below, I think. When you adopt this in this view, it means it's a new bubble. And then you may or may not, and that's independent, adopt the replacement link. If you adopt the replacement link, like this is what we were talking about all around here. Cool, but here it's not the
adopt
case.
Is multiple. Adopt is a, when you say they adopted it, it contains multiple choices. It's not just adopt or not adopt. It can mean adopt several independent things.
Yeah, well, here there are different things. There's adopting the pineapple does not belong in traditional pizza and saying, okay, this is a bubble I want in my view. And then there's adopting the claim that, by the way, the replacement claim, which is saying, by the way, every time we said this, we meant this.
Yeah, so let's go with that scenario. Yes,
and that's a separate thing.
replacement.
And that's a separate bubble, if you will, that presumably they would not adopt. No, we did not mean that every time we said this. So
but they're adopting it. I'm not interested in the not adopting. No, they are. I'm not interested in the not adopting. I'm interested in the they want to adopt it. What happens? Because that's where the problem lies.
Then if they adopt it, then the cascade happens.
Where? So these
locally.
What does it mean to a cascade to happen locally when pineapple does not belong on pizza is number 11 that got unified with 4? So, but now that one is being replaced. Like I'm trying to imagine.
Okay.
Both
so,
what do you see on the CDL then? What do you see in context B and what do you see in context A? So it's being adopted locally, but all of these claims in the local view are global claims.
Yes.
So what happens?
Well, it's being adopted which is a local claim. There's the only real local claim here is this one.
Yeah, exactly. So what does it mean to adopt locally?
What it means to adopt locally. Okay, if you adopt a replacement locally, you're saying, oh, whenever A was said, I want to replace with B, so that cascades and all the links also become local replacement links. And if you want to make that public, if you say my local adoption.
Pineapple does not belong on pizza is already public, as is Hawaiian pizza is very popular, as is people should be allowed to put
Yes, but I'm speaking about the replacement. The replacement link may started public, of course, and then you're saying I'm adopting it and I'm making the result public, which may or may not be true. Like adopting the replacement link means doing the cascade and maybe making the result of the cascade public, probably, or not. You could still have the result of the cascade private while, and it's true, that's a bit paradoxical, fair enough, because if you've adopted the replacement, all this stuff that was public has become invalid in your context, but that's okay. You could just say, okay, it's become invalid in my context and making that public instead of saying what you've replaced it with. But that's a very marginal use case. In most cases, when you adopt something public, you want to make that adoption public.
But so what would happen? You're making it public.
Yeah.
What does it? What concretely happens here in the CDL database when you make that public?
Then the public becomes aware that you've also adopted this replacement, and that's now 2 local contexts that have replaced pineapple does not belong on pizza by pineapple does not belong on traditional Italian pizza.
What happens when you look at the CDL? Like, what will the data in the CDL look like at that point?
You'll still have both versions, but you'll have, by the way, 2 out of 2 contexts made this replacement, or N out of M contexts made that replacement. So this replacement is very popular. So it seems very few people actually mean the original one. But they
so
still...
it essentially means that, I mean, that something will need to happen here, right? So for the entire argument, so they adopt it. So then in essence, they're going to add Italians don't get to decide what anyone puts on their pizza. That will get added as well to the relevance of pineapple does not belong on pizza, correct? If the assumption is they adopted,
Yes, yes. Okay,
then that will become
now
that relevance argument will just translate to the new one. And then there's a disagreement, of course, with like context A thinks that's not relevant, context B thinks it's relevant, apparently. Or they choose for each and every part of the graph whether or not they want to adopt it or not.
That is a very important point. When you do a replacement, I think you should look at the cascade and say, does that still make sense? Because replacement is a big deal. You're saying everywhere I said
that's where context comes in, right? Because
yep,
that means you need to look at everything.
Yeah, and if they're careful, they should see, oh no, this one, the cascade should not apply to this one. So that means so probably we shouldn't do the replacement globally, and we shouldn't do a replacement. We should instead make the pineapple into but that's if they catch it, if they're careful. If they're not careful, they'll do it globally. They'll say they'll apply it to Italians don't get to decide, and somebody will say, how is that not relevant? And then they'll get contested, and then they may notice, oh, we shouldn't have done this. And then they'll come back on the replacement, and they'll have the two versions as they should have done in the first place. Frankly, they shouldn't have adopted the replacement. I hope you agree with that. Like you ask, what happens if they replace? Now we went into that scenario. It's a bad idea, but we agree it's a possible scenario.
It's a bad idea, but I mean, they might decide to replace based on the current understanding of the context, and they don't understand the context A, and that's the whole point. So you will.
Yeah, it will happen. It will happen. So then what will happen is somebody will say, hey, your irrelevant thing here does not hold. And so there'll be a claim against that. And at some point, that claim will be made public. They'll look at that and like, oops, we goofed. And then they'll probably have to readopt the pineapple does not belong on pizza in general and correct the link to say, well, we didn't mean Italians don't get to decide what anyone puts in their pizza is relevant to the link on traditional pizza, but actually the link to the other one. So they'll make the correction in 2 steps.
Yeah, I mean, I think I understand it, but it's because of these complications, and this is a tiny example. It's because of these complications that I don't think it's a good idea to make replacements public. For me, that's why I have a local and a global claim, and local simply points to the global. And yes, locally you can replace which global claim you point to, which to me is a less problematic way of dealing with this scenario.
I think that adopting replacements is generally a bad idea and should be made very, very carefully.
It has cascading implications, and when you cascade, you pull in assumptions from different contexts, and that's where it's problematic. That's why for me, it's very different that you're looking at a global claim and you can just.
But I still maintain, I don't think. Okay, you keep saying there's no, and this is another topic up to a point, and I didn't even finish my scenarios, but maybe that'll.
But I get the scenario where you want to replace. So you're suggesting to replace and essentially merge and bring in all changes, and yes, you can keep contesting them. Whereas my suggestion is you just change locally and you point the previous local claim to a new updated global canonical claim, and the discussions get separated. Like, I don't want to mix them at that point.
Right, but I mean, it's so much more complex to do it this way, but Marc-Antoine's whole goal is federation. In that case, each peer is at the same level as the others, is on par with global, right? And in that case, he needs to solve this problem. Whereas
no,
you're probably thinking of it as
I don't think it's a problem. What's wrong with context A talking about something different than context B? Like, why do they need to be aware about very local context replacements in context A?
Well, Marc-Antoine, do you have the intention of local context discussions publishing their context-specific claims to the larger federation, or is it only when you move it to central canonical database that it essentially quote unquote publishes to other contexts?
Both, I see both as possible in the sense that, okay, the how about Hawaiian, I think I would expect, I don't want to make rules about this, but I would expect local context A to never publish that, because who cares? They could publish it, but I assume they won't. I could imagine, for me, federation is fractal. That means I could imagine context A and context B creating, oh, we're having a conversation, so let's create context C that encompasses both of us, where we can hash it out between us before it goes to the global federation, because before it's made absolutely public, because I allow communities, ad hoc communities, and that means two communities can create an ad hoc communities, which is the union, and have a discussion there. So the same reasoning would happen here, because the adoption by community A or community B does not entail adoption by community A plus B. But it is, I do think that the global federation is a thing in itself, and what matters in most cases is what's visible to the global federation. But it's not, is it a difference of degree or nature? I'm not sure. There is a notion of fully public, but that's a more legal version, right? Everybody's allowed to see this. So my answer to your question is both. Where I agree with Stephen is replacement is a very delicate operation. It only makes sense if done carefully in a local context and should not extend to the federation. And I've said many times, replacement in local context A does not extend to global. And I don't expect it to extend to another context. I don't expect contexts to adopt replacements in general, but they could. If they see, oh, we've also been making that mistake, we've also been making that conflation, then they could adopt, but they should do it carefully. Like replacement is a very fraught operation, and people should be aware of that. But what will happen often is people saying, keeping, like, and that was my original text version, actually, pineapple does not belong on pizza. We're still keeping around, but now we're not supporting it anymore. It's still public, but we don't support it. We now support instead, and that's not the same as replacement. We shift our support from that generic to the more specific claim, pineapple does not belong on traditional Italian pizza. This is a more plausible scenario, in which case everything can be made public and there's no conflict of cascades, right? And the Italians don't put, the support for Italians don't put pineapple on pizza as relevant to pineapple does not belong on pizza. That is, again, lose support for that, and it will become a claim that nobody believes in, or at least nobody in this diagram, and maybe somebody else makes it, and then they'll see, oh, people who used to believe it have shifted, again, because that's a shift belief from this to the specific version, and maybe we should do the same as well. But there's a memory in the system that this shift happened from the generic support to the specific support, so that people who make the generic claim again can see, oh, a lot of people shifted to the specific claim, and that's a win, because the specific.
That's the main reason you want to support this replace.
Yes.
But then again, you can even do that if you keep it local. But
yeah, correct.
By keeping it local, I mean
no.
by keeping it local, I mean that.
No, you cannot do that if you keep it local. You have to make the shift.
Yeah, I mean, the shift happens locally, but the fact that something got shifted can still be public.
Exactly.
So the main discussion of this whole scenario is whether or not context B should be bothered by the choice of context A to shift discussion to a more specific claim. I'm saying I don't see the benefit of doing that. You're saying there's a benefit in notifying them about that. For me,
Right.
it's perfectly fine if context B discusses one thing and context A another one, and they just shift indeed, and that this global system can be made aware about that shift. But I mean, other than that, context B indeed can see, because they indeed use the canonical pineapple does not belong in pizza, and indeed context A added a specialization.
Yeah.
They can see that, but other than that, for
What-
me,
what I think
don't-
what I think would happen more relevant in context B, and I think you'll agree with that, is that the not relevant thing was defended by context A, and now they'll see, oh, context A has stopped defending that. Okay, cool. So this thing that we deem not relevant, you know, context A used to defend this being relevant to that. Okay, they used to defend this, and now context B says this is not relevant. Now context A shifts, and now they don't defend this link anymore. They've shifted it to the other.
They can even agree it's not relevant.
Yeah, exactly. So now people in context B, what they should really see is, oh, by the way, this thing that we said was not relevant, nobody cares about it anymore.
No,
nobody
it got
defends
accepted.
it.
Context A can say, yes, I agree,
Yeah.
but that's why we're actually talking about something different.
Yeah, exactly.
That's changing people's minds. It happens.
Yeah, exactly. And context B would get notified. What I'm saying is it's relevant for context B to be notified that this thing that they attacked is now nobody believes it, or maybe a fringe. And so they don't need to spend energy on buttressing that because nobody cares. Good.
Yeah, and then you can exactly see like, oh, but yeah, either way, all of that is possible.
Yeah.
But none of this requires the complexity of replacing claims and making that from local to public and all that stuff. That's the only thing I'm hinting at. If you can very flexibly, and that's what people do. People very flexibly make local changes. Like the local context can be fully mutable, and people can replace that with this, and people can make sense of it because they've been part of the whole context, and there's a buildup of shared assumptions. That's very useful to do. So I'm totally on board with replacing claims in the local context. I'm just trying to minimize impact that has on a global context where things should be considered in the same
What I'm saying is this replacement should be seen by the global context, so that the next time somebody makes that claim that was replaced, they'll know, oh, by the way, people usually replaced it by that. Maybe you want to adopt that replacement because it's actually an improvement that you agree with. So
yeah,
I would.
Okay, you can do that in both cases.
No, if it's private, if it's private, nobody's aware of it.
That's not true. You can have
private by definition means
you can in your local context.
Yeah.
Decide to start talking about something different. That's what replacing means. You don't replace, you just say, no, we're going to talk about this other thing. In a global context, nothing changes. And yes, you can make it public that some people decided to start talking.
You're doing more than that. You're saying my previous support for this has now shifted to support for that. So I think that this is an improvement on that. And I'm making that public so that next time somebody comes with the raw version, they have access. Oh, it could be improved this way.
But all of that you want to, okay, so
I want to make that public, yes.
So, no, I get you want access to that, but like I'm just looking at the user interaction of things, how the user expresses all of that. Yeah. Like, so they replace and at the same time then maybe accept the non-relevant argument. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here in order to get what you want.
Yes, but it's not, if you're doing, and you have a point, there's a UX aspect here, but what I'm saying is it can be made fairly simple in the sense that if you replace, it could be made so that addition. But
you can replace and believe in the original as well. That's also possible. In this scenario, yeah, it would be a bit weird because you replace indeed because you see, well, that's not really, but you can also replace and still believe in the thing, the original.
Then you wouldn't replace, you would add. Why would you replace if you stop believing in the
Because
original?
replacing, we're discussing what replacing means, because replacing in a local context means that in that context, you want to talk about something different.
Yes.
It's not necessarily saying we should be talking about, well, no, in that context, you should be talking about something
Yeah,
different.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But stating that everyone should be talking about something different is a whole different operation. And you seem to be equating, linking the two somehow, like.
No. I kept saying very specifically, replacing in the context is local and does not impact the global context. I said that at least 5 times. I'm not saying
that
that
not fully, because if you replace a global one and you decide to make all of the replacements global, then somehow you need to decide which replacements do become global or not, right?
Well, I said it would make sense as a heuristic to make all cascades on public links public.
Yes, so that means
it does mean checking, and that's got nothing to do with oh God, I also have a hard stop.
Half an hour ago.
As of now, I have to leave.
Okay.
Sorry
but
about that.
I think I understand the merging better now.
Okay.
I'm not a fan of it, but I think I get it.
We'll talk more because I still have another scenario to go through.
Well, you don't have to convince me. It's just understanding. See you.